Welcome to this edition of an ICANN Media podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hislop. We are at the Global Petroleum Show in Calgary. Now, one of the things about this show is that they have a lot of seminars with wonderful, useful information. And this gentleman I'm going to introduce you to right now conducted one of those seminars yesterday. Ryan Bostick, you're with Stanley Engineered Fastening. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Your topic had to do with safety.
So yesterday we were talking about dropped objects and secondary retention. In the offshore markets, we've started to focus quite a bit on secondary retention because of dropped objects. So when you go into a manufacturing environment, a refinery environment, a mining environment, and drilling environment, anything oil and gas, if you look above your head, there's typically a lot of things that weigh a whole lot that can fall down on top of you. So you start to ask yourself, all that stuff that's over my head, what's holding it together? What's keeping it from killing me or breaking my neck? And so about a couple years ago, there was a group out of Aberdeen called dropsonline.org that put together a secondary retention book that said every single time you fasten something together to keep it from falling, these are the items that you should be using to back up that primary retention being torque. So yesterday we explained what a dropped object was. We explained when a dropped object can hurt or injure you.
Do you want to tell us?
Yeah. So basically at 4 pounds and 6 feet high, it'll break a guy's neck and kill him.
Really? Wow,
and there's a chart that goes with that shows all the heights and all the weights, and there's a portion at the top of the chart that's red. So red is dead. Orange is really, really, really injured, and green is what they call a near miss. So the green typically is what most of the OEMs have started to focus on, because the near misses will eventually lead to someone being fatally injured. So they're avoiding all the near misses first and foremost with the secondary retention devices.
So I'm surprised when you say something as light as 4 pounds, drop from 6 feet, can kill somebody. You must have other people surprised at that as well.
It was crazy the first time I saw it. The guys at Drops Online did the calculator. It's on their website. You can look it up. We use them as credit, give them credit for it. We didn't invent it. We just use it and show it to other people. But it's nuts, and it's even crazier when you start to look at what a hard hat is rated for. If you start looking into hard hat safety, I had two guys yesterday, and you'd have to validate this, told me that a hard hat is rated for a pound at 5 feet. So 1 pound at 5 feet is all the hard hat is rated to save you from. How much stuff above your head in an oil and gas environment weighs more than a pound? And we sell fasteners, and it's funny because we end up talking about the fastener falling. The fastener weighs a half a pound or a quarter a pound or an ounce, whatever it weighs. It's not about the fastener. It's about what the fastener is holding together. Is the fastener holding together a top drive? Is the fastener holding together a crane? Is the fastener holding together a light that weighs 25 pounds? And it has 4 little nuts holding it together.
So you mentioned the primary way of retention is torque. So tell us a little bit about the secondary.
So secondary typically is a locking device. So that locking device may be a deformation lock nut. It may be a patch or glue that when you apply to the bolt or the nut, it adheres to them and glues the joint shut. So imagine a super glue for bolts. It's a one-time use. They work really, really, really well one time. But if you repair it, you have to make sure that you replace it, remove it properly. Therein lies the rub. Not everybody does that in the field. 25 feet in the air with salt water spray in their face. It's a little more problematic when you got to replace it with a glue and a primer. The one we see the most that works really well is safety wire. Safety wire tends to be kind of the common use for secondary retention. It's typically a soldered wire to the frame or mast, whatever you're attaching to, and the bolt and nut. It's a little time consuming, but not near as much as some of the other items. And then lock nuts and lock washers. So we're in the lock nut market. Most lock nuts prior to our inventions and our designs in the 70s were what they're called deformation threads. So you have a standard nut and they've deformed the top ends of the nut. So when you slide the bolt through the middle of the nut, it interferes with the bolt going through the hole. This works really well, and they typically don't ever loosen. So they're a good product for a one-time use. The problem in an outdoor environment and an offshore environment is they damage the bolt. When they damage the bolt, you end up with pits or holidays, and you end up with corrosion. If you end up with corrosion, when's the bolt going to corrode and break? This also causes problems when you add the safety wire. If there's corrosion on the bolt, you have safety wire on the end of the bolt and the nut, and they're held together, but what if the bolt cracks and breaks from corrosion? There's nothing holding the middle together. So now the whole thing comes down on your head like a bolo tie.
Well, tell us about the products, because you've got a couple of products here that you showcased yesterday.
So the first thing that got added to the drops book that we make is called Spiral Lock. Spiral Lock took the standard 60-degree technologies, which is 60 degrees up, 60 degrees down, and they basically got rid of the 60-degree and replaced it with a 30-degree angle in the female thread. So the second the bolt walks in the hole, old school technology, it would grab the left or the right flank, and you would end up with gaps or loosening issues. We grab the tip of the male bolt, and we hold it in a spiral line of contact. When you torque the bolt up, the tips of that male thread dig into our ramps and lock. The main difference between our locking thread form and anything else that has been suggested for secondary retention is it's reusable. So if you go into the Drops Online book, they only have 2 out of 100 items that you can reuse. That becomes important when you're 30 feet up in an oil rig. You typically don't want to have to change out the fasteners.
Fair enough.
And so that's where Spiral Lock's starting to get into the secondary retention market.
You mentioned that you do a lot of work with offshore rigs. I imagine there must be some work here in Alberta as well in the oil sands.
Absolutely. Some of the mines have been using the Spiral Lock product on their shaker systems. The shakers are typically what separates the good stuff from the bad stuff. They're huge. They're 30-foot machines that have violent exciters on top of them to shake. If you've ever watched a gold mining show, there's shaker systems all over the gold mining shows. Sometimes they're called trommels. Sometimes they're called rock shakers. These are crazy vibration environments. They're huge equipment, but they're critical to the mining environment. If they shut down, the mine shuts down. So
it could be something small like this. It could be something small like this. It could lead to a shutdown, and this will prevent that.
Absolutely.
Ryan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We've been chatting with Ryan Bostick here on ICANN Media.